So now I'm going to try and talk about the designer as trickster, and before I hand over to Tom and Design's Tricky for Future. So I'm going to sort of try and, the book it's got all this information in, and it's a very different read to perhaps the way I'm going to put it now. But I started out, I work on crime, so I've always been interested in fraud, and I've always been interested in the cultural icons of tricksters. And so this book that you probably know very well, Trickster Makes the World, Lewis Hyde talks about the trickster as a boundary crosser. And he argues that every group has its edge, its sense of in and out. And the trickster is always there at the gates of the city and the gates of life. And that's true. Ambiguity comes with that. So what do I mean by tricks? I mean a cunning act or scheme, intending to deceive or outwit someone, a skillful magic act performed for amusement. Or tricky, when you use the phrase requiring care and skill because it's difficult or awkward. Or trickery, which we usually think about. And actually, there's a really good exhibition at the Welcome on tricks, if you want to go and see it. But trickery is often thought about as sleight of hand, deception, dishonesty, cheating, all the definitions that are listed there. And so how can we want to use the phrase trickery in relationship to design? Well, in culture, there are many cultural figures from every nationality, every culture, philosophy, religion, talks about tricksters as those linked to transformation and change. So it's no surprise design has a role. There's Till from the German, Kalush from Zulu, Metis from Greece, Mohini from India. Trickster figures are everywhere trying to explain how transformation occurs. This is an anthropological account. It's from Edmund Leach. But tricksters are usually associated, as Hyde says, with boundary crossing, hybrid and ambiguous spaces where innovation can occur, sometimes linked to mischief, transgression, disruption, deception, moral ambiguity of spaces, categories as well as ideas of magic and play. I think that the idea of the space in between makes sense if you think about male and female or any category where the ambiguous space is difficult for the people involved. And I often think as designers in this way that what we're taught in design schools about design's heroic problem-solving capacity, which is a firmly democratic, is a sort of idealistic account really, rather than ideas about design as a money-making, profit-driven activity, a market-led focus. So when do we talk about that? And when do we talk about the designer in that way as trickster? Well, certainly Flusser was one of the first. He talked about the designers as a cunning plotter, laying his traps. I mean, there's many, you can go back further than that. There are many who talk about the designers as those not to be trusted, as magicians, pulling out of the hat conclusions or solutions that are perhaps, dubious. And I thought few contemporary designers would want to be called tricksters. But actually I was wrong. When I started to research this, I found that it's usually when they're dead that they own up to being tricksters. And it's only for the social good, it's for the better. So I learned from the obituary of the American designer and academic John Reinfrank that he had always designed himself as a trickster because he tricked companies into doing the right thing. So he did it for the greater good. Well, actually, most designers don't just do it for the greater good. They do it often for their own survival too, and we have to be real about that. But actually, more and more designers that I teach want to make a difference and change the world. And that I think that, if we have to trick people, then I think at least we need to be honest about why those tricks are happening. I also learned from the obituary of the Japanese designer Isias Hassel of Milan that he would always be the joyful and smiling trickster in the meaning of a dynamic catalyst when the center-periphery combination, a definition that himself had chosen because it will offer no better portrayal. But I bet he didn't say that when he was doing his presentations for his work, when he's trying to raise money, because actually the trickster as a concept is one that's really tricky. And so I would say that what I'm trying to talk about, what Tom and I are trying to talk about in the book, is the difference between the trickster figure and the trickster mind. And I've always thought that, as you know, I run Design Against Crime at University of the Arts London, that criminals are inherently creative. And so when I talk about the trickster mind, I mean the sort of design thinking and reasoning, the sort of disruptive, sideways, creative thinking, or trickster, that's out there. I often associate it with somewhat criminal, anarchic thinking that can have a positive role in design. And that's how I got to this discussion. But there are problems with that account. So in the book, we talk about wisdom, calming, practical action in the moment, qualities that can push against the apparatus with the potential to craftily sidestep, dissent, or otherwise maneuver change forward. But you know what? It's not as easy as that. And it's really important that we actually, and we try in the book to acknowledge, you know, the issues and the processes that go with that. And so tricky problems are often wicked dilemmas, wicked problems. And tricky thinking is an attempt to deal with, you know, a problem that doesn't have a product as a solution. The answer can't satisfy everybody. And so the reason I think that we're on tricky thinking and ethical dilemmas is because there are really complex global challenges in the world. And wicked problems, from my point of view, are linked absolutely to market-led design economies that are now being challenged by sustainable and social design approaches. And so if we want to take something positive from this, at least with social design, there are new roles for designers emerging. And here are some of them. I'm sure you've seen this slide before. But designer as facilitator, as collaborator, as trigger and enabler are some of those facilities and capacities of the changing role that we've all spoke about and some of us have been trying to deliver in our day jobs.
I want to just put into words some thoughts about this event, why we're here and what our overriding purpose today and tomorrow can be. And to get there, I'm just going to make a very few brief comments about ethics and about design's relationship to any ethical thinking. One reason I'm here is because I convene for the Design Research Society a special interest group which is called Objects, Practices, Experiences and Networks, which spells open, which says something about its ethic. And the ancient history of the event that we're at today goes back to 2013 when I ran a symposium in Nottingham called Good Things and Bad Things, which intended to cover some of the territory that we're engaging with today. Lorraine contributed, Shana Agid contributed, and out of that event came the idea for the book, drawing on a paper that I'd given about design and the trickster at the 2012 DRS conference. So this goes back, like these things generally do, quite a long way. The book is here, and this event is partly a celebration of that, with the idea that because it inevitably has gaps, and therefore there are opportunities for further debate and contribution, and that today and tomorrow we may together identify new strands of interest to develop and to work on together. To keep with my agenda, though, I recently found this pithy statement about ethics from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. Ethical thought consists of the systematic examination of the relations of human beings to each other, the conceptions, interests, and ideals from which human ways of treating one another spring, and systems of value on which such ends of life are based. Now, it's my view that good design requires that we take responsibility to systematically examine our role in the relations of human beings, acknowledge valid ideals that our actions serve, and acknowledge that we work within systems of value, human systems, that are made up of people, the design world, and institutions. These systems are not fixed, and their form emerges from interactions between institutions, the design world, and people. And to be ethical, we need to have a respectable level of knowledge of the systems of value in which we work. We need to look up from the drawing board. So I propose that there may be, perhaps, and these are caricatures, the first two certainly, three ways to think about an ethic for design and the ethics of designs, which take different views on the agency that's involved, picking up on Bernard's point in his remarks earlier. Agency, what design and designers can or may do. So my first one is perhaps design as a functionary. It's always an element in a larger economic, political, social process Therefore, it never gets to call the shots on ethics, and it never should, or it won't any longer be design. It will be activism or politics. For all the brave talk about subverting the context, and even if it does involve a unique mode of design thinking, design should know its place, leave the ends to others, concentrate on means, and take the paycheck. Obviously, that's a caricature, but I think it rings true to some extent, and it is inevitably characterizes the inevitable experience of many people who work in design. My next way of thinking about design's agency in relation to ethics, I'm calling design as an agent, or designers as agents. And I've put the word critical in the slide there, which is crucial. So we are here to inspect this trickster rhetoric of subverting the context. And we grew up, all of us who have been educated in design, with an assumption, or a set of assumptions, that design is about changing the world for good through the application of rationality to wicked problems. We are educated, therefore, in ethics, which may mean working for good, or at least doing no harm by designing harmful things. We are wedded to the idea that design has moral agency. Many of the speakers that we're going to hear today, their work is evidence of this. Resistance to the idea of design as servile speaks through the work that Lorraine has just touched on. And we, in this construction, have an assumption that design has agency, and this can be moral. Given that we know enough about the systems of value, going back to Isaiah Berlin, that we are placed in. Now, that's all very well. Those come from the design side of the equation, if you like. But our designs, the things, if they are things, or the systems, if they are systems, go out into the world and do what they do. So the designs themselves have agency. And again, I'm caricaturing here because this is perhaps the type of design that has the most agency. Designs are political players bound into networks of material and social relations. And whatever one's politics, and an ounce of empathy for people being killed by smart weaponry in the Middle East leads our attention to politics and to the designed artifacts that, for instance, killed and maimed 680 people attending a funeral at Sana'a, Yemen in 2016. A scenario repeated since. Such designs, the weapons that do this, are not neutral. They have lethality designed into them. Lethality is the arms trade's term for a really good weapon. That is their raison d'etre. They also have symbolic and political agency in international relations, tied up with unregulated trade in arms that has been shown to facilitate armed conflict. The place we are today was used last year to host a reception for an arms company called Leonardo, coinciding with the Farnborough Air Show. When I was a child, the Farnborough Air Show was a jolly good day out for the family. It's actually an arms fair. Leonardo is the 9th largest global arms company. In 2015, its sales totaled 9.3 billion, which is about a quarter of the number one, which is Lockheed Martin. It is a collaborator with British Aerospace and Airbus in a company that makes missiles. So at the same time as that was going on, a group of designers and artists who engage with political matters had work in an exhibition, also here, called From Hope to Nope. Some of those people took issue with the coincidence, and after some dispute with the museum about its ethics policy, withdrew their work. Now, I want to make my next point very, very clear. Today's focus is not on the funding of museums. Though, if you are to take the inclusive view that I am advocating, in other words, to look up from the drawing board, to be concerned about such a thing is not ruled out. To want to distance your actions and the actions of your work from the international network that supports and normalizes is the key word here, and it's the word that I use in my chapter in the book, which covers this territory, that normalizes the arms industry, has an ethical logic. The exhibitors who removed their work last year set up an alternative exhibition, From Note to Hope. And this story is not finished, and I'm hopeful that today and tomorrow we will find ways of continuing it in a very productive way and a way that will show us some positions we can take as a discipline, as an industry, because design is an industry, which shine some light on these matters. So that's where I shall leave the introduction. Apart from saying that, in conclusion, we might recognize that certainly one of the contributors to the book, Luisa Prado and Pedro Oliveira, takes very seriously the sort of challenge that I've put out there to you just now. We need to challenge what design designs in their chapter about speculative and critical design. And a quotation from Tony Fry, who's notably written about design and politics, taking a bleak view, a view of design as part of the problem of an unsustainable model of world making. And he's challenging us, therefore,